Welcome to the NatRefs Show, a weekly global podcast on sustainable cooling and heating technologies, brought to you by Shecco and supported by Teco. My name's Andrew Williams and I'll be hosting today's show from Brussels, Belgium. I'm the European editor of Shecco's industry-leading websites r744.com, hydrocarbons21.com and ammonia21.com. I'm also the editor of Accelerate Europe and Accelerate Australia and New Zealand magazines. I'm joined today by my colleague in the US, Shecco's North American editor Michael Gary, editor of Accelerate America magazine, and Shecco's deputy events manager, Pilar Aleu. This week, we'll discuss the recent Atmosphere Europe conference and opposition from some US states to EPA plans to revise leak repair and maintenance regulations for stationary refrigeration and air conditioning equipment using HFCs. Pilar, to set the scene, maybe you can tell us about last week's Atmosphere Europe conference.
Hi Andrew. Yes, of course. So last week we had our annual Atmosphere Europe conference. It happened in Italy and it was a great success. We are very happy with the result, the feedback we got. There were about 55 industry leading sponsors and partners. I think it's the year where we had the highest number of organizations involved at that level. And this is showing that actually the market is moving and the commitment from the industry is there to push natural refrigerants faster to the market. We had a lot of people there, a lot of discussions, the presentations from different angles and different applications. And the information is now available on the website of the conference, so everyone is welcome to check them out.
Yes, Michael, so I'm sure you followed some of our coverage on the websites from last week. Among the highlights were a technology panel featuring leading experts on each refrigerant. We had presentations from Professor Armin Hafner from the Norwegian University of Science and Technology on CO2, from Andy Pearson of Star Refrigeration on ammonia, and from René van Gerwen of Entropy Cooling Solutions on hydrocarbons.
Yes, actually, that was one of the most exciting sessions of the 3 days, and it's great that we could have all these three experts and recognized globally to talk about each refrigerant. It was a good start of a kickoff session.
Yes, Hafner was actually talking about heat pumps in particular. CO2 is quite well established already in commercial refrigeration in Europe, for example, and he was looking to identify some of the most promising future growth areas and cited hot water heat pumps, talking about the large temperature glide and the increase in heat rejection loss that you get by using CO2 in a heat pump. Those properties are unique to CO2, making it ideal for heat pumps, he argued, singling out space heating, cooling, and hot water production as potential applications.
From the U.S. perspective, we see Europe basically leading the way in natural refrigerant technology in terms of development, with ejectors and those kinds of technologies for CO2 transcritical, and just leading the world in installations of CO2 and in ammonia and hydrocarbons. So I'm just curious as to how that, we saw that demonstrated at the Atmosphere Show.
Yes, we heard from a number of CO2 manufacturers of CO2 systems at the conference, Advancor. They mentioned that they've already installed several thousand of their units in Europe. And one of the biggest pieces of news, also from Chillventer, but again reflected at the conference, was Panasonic. Panasonic launched a 15 kilowatt CO2 condensing unit model on the European market this summer, and a 4 kilowatt unit has been available in Europe since last year. 250 of these condensing units have already been installed in Europe in just 1 year, and it already has 9,500 of those installed in Japan. So certainly, definitely some big potential for those CO2 condensing units to make a greater impact on the market here in Europe. And together with what European manufacturers such as Carrier and Advansor and SCM Frigo, among others, are doing, I think certainly these condensing units for smaller stores and food retail applications is a growth area.
Yeah, certainly there were a focus on commercial, and here we are looking at smaller stores and also warm climates. There were many discussions, many case studies that are on the website now available, but also another way to differentiate and maybe to see that the market here in Europe is moving a bit faster than everywhere else is that we, for instance, look also into HVAC applications, and then here we are also seeing that CO2 heat pumps or propane, ammonia are also being sold and installed in Europe. We also had a MAC session, and again is a niche mark. There is a lot of potential for car manufacturers to use CO2 in air conditioning, and for the first time we had an amazing car that was in the entrance using CO2 air conditioning. So there are things outside commercial refrigeration that are showing that actually, the market is moving in different directions, and all natural refrigerants are being used and installed in many places.
Yes, and CO2 wasn't the only refrigerant at the conference. Obviously, we covered all natural refrigerants equally. We had an interesting keynote presentation from Andy Pearson from Star Refrigeration about ammonia, pointing out that it's been in continuous use since 1830 and is one of the safest and easiest to use refrigerants, actually, and that's why it's been used for 180 years. He's been talking about what he terms a renaissance of ammonia being driven by the trend towards lower charge systems, talking about this point where the ammonia charge becomes low enough to reduce the safety risk without compromising on system performance, and describing that as the sweet spot that an increasing number of contractors are trying to hit for their customers, and particularly highlighting distributed and packaged systems as a trend for ammonia going forward, not just in Europe but around the world.
So, Andrew, we also had the second edition of Accelerate Awards ceremony as part of the conference. Can you tell us a bit more about it?
Yes, so this conference, one of the highlights of the conference was the second edition of the Accelerate Europe Awards. The awards, named after the Accelerate Europe magazine, recognise the biggest players among end users and manufacturers of natural refrigerant systems in Europe. And on the Tuesday evening of the conference, the ceremony recognised these leaders in 5 different categories. The 5 awards were the Person of the Year, the Innovation of the Year, and Best in Sector awards for food retail, light commercial and industrial. The Best in Sector award for food retail went to Metro AG. Metro is a world-leading international wholesale and food retail company committed to phasing out F-gases in all its stores worldwide by 2030, replacing them with natural refrigerant systems where it's technically and economically feasible to do so. And the award went to Metro this year in particular because of their commitment to bringing natural refrigerants to new markets such as Russia and China. Earlier this year, Metro opened China's first transcritical CO2 system in the retail sector in a Beijing supermarket, a Beijing wholesale store. And the idea is that the German multinational will fit transcritical systems in all its new Chinese stores by 2025. For Best in Sector Light Commercial, that award went to Unilever. Unilever was recognised for its commitment to hydrocarbons, which it decided to adopt in 1999. By 2016, Unilever had already installed 2.2 million hydrocarbon cabinets, and it prefers to use propane and isobutane for low temperature applications. And finally, the best in sector industrial, that went to E.ON Sweden in recognition of a 40 megawatt ammonia heat pump project for district heating in the harbour area of the city of Malmö, which it fitted in December 2017. That project features 4 GEA ammonia heat pumps, each with a heating capacity of 10 megawatts. And the heat pumps use the heat from Malmö's sewage treatment and waste incineration plants to deliver heating to approximately 100,000 homes in Malmö. Then finally, the Person of the Year award. This was a hotly anticipated category, and this went to Sergio Girotto. He is the president and CEO of NX. NX is an Italian manufacturer of CO2 systems, and Girotto, he's well known in the natural refrigerant sector. He designed the first CO2 transcritical supermarket in 1999. In 2001, he installed the first ever CO2 transcritical system in a large supermarket. He founded his company NX in 2004, and since then it's produced over 1,000 CO2 transcritical systems. He's very well known in the sector. He's patented a number of products and system designs, including a liquid ejector for overfeeding evaporators. So congratulations to him. And the final award was the Innovation of the Year. This was voted for by the public online in the week running up to the event and from conference participants during the event itself. And from the shortlist, the chosen winner was GEA for the Blue Q, a low-charge ammonia chiller for air conditioning large buildings.
Cool. Thank you very much, Andrew, for the overview. That's great, and congratulations to everyone.
Moving on now from the Atmosphere Europe conference to the situation in the US concerning the EPA rules on leak detection of HFC systems. Michael, give us the lowdown about the recent developments there.
Okay, thanks, Andrew. So, as most people know, the Trump administration has been trying to roll back most of the environmental initiatives undertaken by the Obama administration that preceded it, and the especially on the in terms of what the EPA regulations are. And so, this latest thing is that a few months ago, the EPA proposed changing the rules for leak repair of commercial refrigeration systems, which the Obama administration had extended from just ozone depleting refrigeration systems to HFCs, which are not ozone depleting, but of course contribute to global warming. Trump administration doesn't believe in global warming, so they have no problem in basically saying that the leak repair and maintenance regulations, and this is for stationary refrigeration and air conditioning equipment, it can only apply to ozone depleters and not to HFC. So in response to this, the industry in the U.S. has been largely opposed to this change. And it was recently a letter from 15 states and the District of Columbia was sent to the EPA strongly opposing these revisions. States that have taken the lead in its own statewide regulations, like California, for example, and New York, were part of this letter, but a number of others as well. And in fact, all the states who were signatories were part of the what's called the U.S. Climate Alliance, with the exception of 3. The U.S. Climate Alliance is committed to reducing short-lived climate pollutants like HFCs. And one of the states that is not part of the U.S. Climate Alliance plans to join it. The recently elected governor of Illinois, whose name is J.B. Pritzker has stated that he plans to join. So again, the states urge the EPA to withdraw this proposed rule and embrace the appliance maintenance and leak provisions that apply to HFCs and not just ozone depleters. So it's another example of what's going on in the United States. It's an example of how states have taken the initiative to support environmental regulations in the absence of federal leadership. And we're going to see more and more of that. Already California and 3 other states, Connecticut, Maryland, and New York, have announced plans to regulate HFCs, and we expect many more states to follow suit in the coming year, so that we end up having quite a large representation of the U.S., taking the initiative on HFCs and other environmental regulations, and in order to maintain the U.S. commitment to the Paris Accord, which of course the Trump administration is trying to get out of. So it's really an interesting example of what's going on in the U.S., and I hope that states continue to lead on the climate front, following what California has done. California, of course, passed the Cooling Act recently. That's very strict on HFCs, and they're going to continue to support natural refrigerant installations in California with incentives.
And specifically, just to wrap up on this, the issue of this letter, what would be the next step now? Is the EPA obliged to respond?
Well, the EPA was actually asking for feedback for this proposed rule, and the deadline was November 15th, which is when this letter was issued. So now they have all the feedback from the industry and from the states. So they'll be proceeding now to issue a final rule based on what they're hearing and what they want to do, and hopefully they will take this into account, this opposition into account in the final rule, and reflect the fact that many people want to regulate the leaking of HFCs. This would allow people to leak as much HFCs as they want without any repercussions, which would be really detrimental.
Okay, thank you for those insights, Michael. And certainly, you're right. I think this trend of states taking independent action on their own on a number of issues related to the HVAC&R sector is definitely something to keep track of in the coming months and years, especially in this administration. Thank you, Michael. Thanks, Pilar. Thanks for listening, and don't forget to tune in next time for another great NatRef show.